Hi, my name is Ryan Mecillas, and this is my assessment project for EDF-645. To start off, I just wanted to state the Colorado standards I'm basing my assessment off of, as well as the lesson that I used the assessment with. This would be writing and composition, Colorado Standard 3, demonstration of mastery in their own writing process with clear, coherent, and error-free polished products. Now, the big thing here is that I wanted students to be able to organize complex thoughts, understand the task and purpose of the assignment, and essentially make the leap between simply reading a text and going beyond that to understanding how central idea is created after reading the author's note from Summer of Mariposas. So that's kind of getting into what my prompt was, but we'll get there in a bit. I also, and just to be clear, so this was sort of my writing piece. Now, Colorado Standard 2, reading for all purposes, understand how language functions in different contexts, command a variety of word learning strategies to assist comprehension, and make effective choices for meaning or style when writing and speaking. So this standard is relating to the way that I used vocabulary during my lesson before the assessment in order to give students time to read the author's note in its entirety. Is about 3 pages long. So I incorporated that into the lesson, and then at the end of the lesson was when they actually did the formative assessment and wrote to the prompt that you will hear about later. Now, the use of vocabulary within classroom activities can help students understand the author's choices, the context, and in turn inform their writing. So essentially, we filled out vocabulary charts using important words that I predetermined throughout the lesson, and I wanted to inform their writing for that assessment at least a little bit. Now, for Station 1, we have our comprehensive assessment system that's currently in practice at Hamilton Middle School in the language and literacy classes, at least for my mentor teacher. I know the other teacher also uses RACES, but I'm not sure exactly how she implements it. And I'm going to talk about RACES as an assessment tool also, as well as being a writing strategy. Now, the current classroom practices, my mentor teacher essentially has weekly writing assessments in the classroom. This involves interacting with 1 to 2 texts throughout the week. Then we do activities that are associated with those texts, like Socratic seminars, reading responses, creative writing, like writing narratives. And then we do projects like building websites and much more. Now, near the end of the week, usually Thursday or Friday, my mentor teacher has her own formative assessment where students are asked to write one RACES paragraph. Now, that paragraph will be graded individually as a formative assessment, but it will also later on be integrated into their larger final paper. So she's using each of these formative assessments as a way to not only track their growth, but also help them build their work up to a bigger project and paper. Now, like I said, the RACES strategy is a writing strategy, but it also is an assessment tool. It's a rubric. Now, the R stands for restate the question. Then we have answer the question. We have cite examples from the text. We explain the response or evaluate. And then as an optional thing, you can summarize your response. This is more part of the sort of the final draft of the paragraphs, I guess. So when we're doing these formative assessments, a lot of times you don't see necessarily the summarized portion, because it's essentially getting their initial ideas down. Now, these end-of-week formative assessments utilize RACES strategy as a rubric, once again. Now, as far as the benefits of using RACES, it emphasizes students that struggle with incorporating higher-level thinking into their writing, and that happens because some students may be eager to answer the questions, but they might need that extra help analyzing it, which is where the cite and explain come in. And so I think that having or races as a strategy in the back of their mind is beneficial to people who need that extra help. It also helps chunk writing in order to make longer essays more manageable. So students are able to think of it as, oh, if I follow this strategy, I'll be able to just go paragraph by paragraph to build up a paper. I think that helps build confidence. Now, when it comes to the rubric itself, it's straightforward and approachable by learners of all levels. And I think that even for the teachers, it's super approachable, and it is an easy way to take a look at students' writing and assess their growth. As far as the relationship to Colorado standards goes, the assessment tool is flexible and allows teachers to tailor student responses to fit content of all kinds. So I think really, and there's a few cases, but in most cases, whatever type of reading you're doing, or especially if you're going to do a formative assessment using complex writing, I think that you can use the RACES strategy to build around those assessments. So you can go standard to standard and sort of tailor the RACES strategy however you need to use it in order to match those standards. And another big thing is it helps you show growth towards mastery. Now, here is the actual rubric that my mentor and I have used in class. I'll get into sort of a critique of it later, as far as having having 5 points onto it, and including the F portion, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Here, you, like I said earlier, you see the restate and answer separated by the evidence and citations. And so that's really two big sides of the coin. A lot of students are able to restate and answer. Where they struggle a little bit, I've noticed, is the citation and explanation or evaluation. Now, as far as my proposal goes, in order to find out the current level of student mastery, I wanted to do a more intensive formative assessment that asks them to use tools they put into action during previous formative assessments. So the ones that my mentor teacher has given them. That boils down to, instead of writing a shorter assessment after working with a text over multiple days, my format will ask students to provide evidence of mastery for the elements of races after spending a shorter period of time with the text. So essentially just one class period. So instead of reading a chapter, maybe reading something else that relates to the chapter, working on that for 3 days, writing notes and all that leading up to a formative assessment or a RACES paragraph on a Thursday or Friday, I want the students to be assessed on how well they're comprehending, how well the reading comprehension is going and their writing mastery is going within one period. So it's a formative assessment, but it kind of has those high risk elements of a standardized assessment or a summative assessment. And to finish off this section, I wanted to just add my critiques of the current assessment format. I put them in questions. So are there better strategies or ways to assess students besides races? So I've looked into the benefits of races, but there are other writing strategies like introduce, cite, explain. And those can be effective because races maybe is a little bit complicated, or maybe I have here, like, do students at this grade level need the extra scaffolding? Maybe ICE, introduce, cite, explain is all they need. This restate and answer portion is really a big deal for students who are developing their writing. And so you can boil those down to introduce. Now, do these RACES paragraphs provide sufficient evidence that students are learning skills they need in order to write a complete essay? I bring that in as a critique because I think, and you'll see in my mentor's prompt, I think that maybe there's a huge focus, which is great, on the writing mastery, but at the same time, how is the reading comprehension portion being assessed? So I'm not sure right now the reading comprehension is being accurately addressed, essentially. Now, Station 2 is design and selection of a focus assessment. I want the students to be writing a full paragraph as a way to determine mastery of reading comprehension and writing. So far, students have worked with a number of low-risk prompts that have assessed their ability to use elements of races. But now, like I said, I want to move into those more high-risk areas. Now, an early assessment prompt I have here is write a response using racist strategy to explain how McCall develops one of the sisters. Use at least 2 citations and 2 character traits. So a big thing for me here is that with this early prompt, she's sort of guiding and leading on the use of the racist strategy. So she has it in there, write a response using the racist strategy. But then she says, use at least 2 citations and 2 character traits. So she's kind of pushing or giving a little breadcrumb that students need to focus on that citation and explanation, which is great, I think, as an early formative assessment. So now I can move beyond that and see if maybe, and you'll see my prompt, maybe they can be successful without those sort of breadcrumbs. Now I have this quote right here that comes from a paper about the benefits of using the racist strategy after this teacher, Lindsay Nichols, had done some pre-assessments, post-assessments using racist strategy and found that it actually helped her students. So she says also that racist strategy helps educators understand students' thinking about a particular text. The strategy allows the student to better organize and elaborate on their written response, clearly showing their thinking on paper. And so I like the focus here on organizing and elaborating responses based on what they're thinking about the text. So there's that element of reading comprehension there. And so I think it's beneficial because if you focus on that reading comprehension portion, the races strategy can be successful. Now, as a formative assessment leading up to their final essay for the unit, students will be asked to interact with the author's note of Summer of Mariposas and write their response during the same period, and it will be to the following prompt. Use the racist strategy to explain how McCall develops the central idea in the author's note at the end of Summer of the Mariposas. Now, as I said before, I simply stated I wanted them to use the racist strategy to explain how McCall develops a central idea. I don't mention anything about using citations or giving them an idea about what they should be writing about. We've learned about central idea. They've been using the racist strategy. So what I want to assess in this exit ticket, in this formative assessment, is can they provide the elements of races just by being asked through this simple prompt, this one sentence prompt. As far as the assessment administration, I want the kids to use computers to work individually. I will give them access to the readings. Essentially, everybody has a book, so they'll be able to use that. Students will need to be prepared to find their own evidence, though, within the reading. Scaffolding and accommodations for students will be included, and those will be pre-planned excerpts from the text. Essentially, we're moving from the kids are taking notes and writing down citations all week that they can use in their writing on Friday to are they going to be able to read, comprehend, and pull out citations within a single class period. Now, analyzing results. Using assessment data to inform future teaching practices. I will just do a quick goal recap. My goals were to analyze student mastery of reading comprehension and writing through the use of the racist strategy. I wanted to answer the question, how well did students perform after having limited time with a text? So more creating that high stakes environment. I wanted to introduce new vocabulary to help build comprehension and create meaning within the text in order to inform their writing. and I wanted to define which skills are in most need of reteach before the final essay or interim assessment. I had a hunch that reading comprehension was going to be the struggle, and that would lead to the citation and explanation or evaluation being a challenge for the students. I wanted to assess that and get it in and get the hard data essentially. So once again, I wanted to analyze how well students transitioned from writing using pieces of the RACES strategy to using all 5 elements. So how well did students show their mastery of the writing task? Were there areas where most students did well or most struggled? And then I wanted to discuss with my mentor teacher whether the content of the material accurately showed the skills of the students. Now, I have a quote here by Thomas Guskey talking about mastery learning. And so I wanted the students to have that focus on reading mastery. I know my mentor teacher so far has really focused on the writing, but I think maybe the struggle is coming from mastery learning. So mastery learning gives teachers a practical means to vary and differentiate their instruction to better meet the students' individual learning needs. As a result, many more students learn well, master the important learning goals in each unit, and gain the necessary prerequisites for success in subsequent units. Essentially, I want to focus on that, differentiate their instruction to better meet students' individual learning needs. I think that's because so far we focused a lot on the writing, which is great, but maybe we need that to turn a little bit and go towards the reading aspect to round everything out, essentially. So here's a look at my data. As you can see on the left, more than 50% of the students did not meet the expectations. And then we had 19 kids that did meet the expectation. As far as the examples I have here, at the top, where it says the central idea that McCall developed was how mothers love their kids and that people should have a chance to redeem themselves. I think this was a great example of how this student was really good at getting that restate and answer down, but for some reason they did not think maybe to use the context clues or the citations that we did earlier in class to show this. And I looked over at their charts, their vocabulary charts that we did, and they could have used a citation they had, but they didn't end up adding it in. And then the one on the bottom, McCall developed the idea of retelling old folklores, and she also said she's always been fascinated by the knowledge of our ancestors. She wanted to write a magical and retelling, story from different folklores. So this one goes a little bit further, starts to maybe start thinking about those folklores, using them as evidence, but still didn't necessarily meet the expectations of using the complete RACES strategy. Now, to continue, we have a couple more in-depth answers here. On the left, we have the central idea McCall developed in the author's note is that everyone deserves a second chance or to make things right. She does this by using the folklore La Llorona. She drowned her kids out of anger. After killing her kids, she felt regret for what she'd done and want to give her a second chance. So while there's a little bit of issue with the grammar and sentence structure here, especially at the end, I do see the restate and answer. I do see the reference to the text when it talks about La Llorona and what happened, and the fact that on that last part, and want to give her a second chance, the student's trying to say that McCall wanted to give La Llorona a second chance. And so I would say that this student, while the sentence structure and grammar is holding them back a little bit, they were showing signs that they were able to use citation and explanation on top of the restate and answer. And then here on the right, the central idea McCall developed in the author's note is that it's an honor to change a point of view or the folklores, and the message is that you can always redeem people for what they've done. This means that even the worst things that people do, you can change the way others see that from the other point of view. And this is another example where this student's right on the edge. While this one doesn't necessarily have as good of a citation as the one on the left, their evaluation is getting into really good territory. They have a this means statement with a message, and I think that that's a big step for the students. It's showing that they're seeing or they're comprehending what the author's saying a little bit more. Now, based on my assessment data, my mentor and I discussed the following. Students have a grasp on the expectation for their writing. So even the lowest scoring products had that restate and answer portion. And that was probably the strongest part of all of the answers. Cite and explain were the weak points. But I noticed that even students who didn't provide a complete answer, they would still have the restate part. They would say the central idea McCall developed was, but they wouldn't have an answer. So the students have a grasp on what's expected of them, but many of them still, for one reason or another, aren't following through. I'd say the problem with the assessment, and something I feared would happen, would be that many of the students would struggle with the citation and explanation. And that's kind of why I scaffolded it a little bit with the vocabulary charts and finding context clues or citation there. So students were required to find citations during those lesson activities, but many did not translate those findings into their assessment, like you saw with the first example on the data slide. Now, additional options for the assessment process. I chose to do a student self-assessment using the RACES rubric. So this was actually a chance for the students themselves to use the rubric instead of just the teachers during grading. Now, students were given an opportunity in a later class period, so this was about a week after my assessment was given, to use a modified version of the RACES rubric to workshop their writing with others. As an exit ticket for the workshop, the students were asked to reflect on what elements were their strengths, weaknesses, as well as set a goal for the final draft of the essay. And then there was the possibility that I wanted to have a goal-setting aspect of the self-assessment beyond the final draft portion, but we ended up just keeping the goal for the final draft. Now, I have this quote by Helrich. A growth mindset continues to surface as a reason that students feel less stressed in English class, and students in her class commented, I could rework an assignment after it was graded, so my grade had a chance to get better. Now, she was focusing on positive action in her classes, and so one of the things that she had as a positive action for students was to build their growth mindset by reflecting on work that they've done. And she noticed that self-reflections built that confidence for students and made things like, final projects or assessments less scary. And that's one thing I wanted to do, was have this sort of assessment show kids what they're looking forward to when they do a standardized test or an interim assessment or have to turn in a final project. Here's a little bit of a look at the rubric that we gave students during the student reflection and the peer workshop. On the left here, there's the I liked statement where they could say what was done well. And then the I wonder section here on the right, where the students could talk about things that could have been done better. And then students were able to make those changes after they reviewed these filled out reflection sheets. I wasn't able to actually get a copy of one of these filled out by students. They were already graded for participation and stowed away. But I appreciate your time. Here's my reference list, and